All right, quick video explaining what you should all be doing on the writing assignment number 2, epistemology writing assignment. So this assignment is going to be due by the end of the day on Friday, October 23rd. Please turn it in on Canvas in a PDF or doc format right here, right? 12-point normal font, double-spaced, and citations are only going to be necessary if for some reason you are quoting or citing something that's outside of the normal reading material for the class. I don't think that you should need anything outside of the normal reading material for the class, but if you find something that you think is interesting, go for it and then make sure to cite it. All right. What I want you to do, instructions, write a paper between 700 and 800 words. That is a strict number. On a skeptical argument that we've covered in lecture and or the course readings. There's going to be 4 of them below. And here's what I want you to do. Follow this outline. Give the argument that you choose below in premise and conclusion form. That is premise, 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 conclusion. And then explain each premise and offer the reasons that somebody would normally have if they were trying to defend the premise, right? So give each premise, like explain the premise, explain what it says, and then give a reason for thinking that it's true, like why somebody would believe that the premise is true itself, right? It can be a reason that you find in the book. It can be a reason that I gave in lecture. It can be your own reason, but it should be an elaboration on a reason in your own words, and it should be, reasonable. Explain then how the premises altogether taken support the conclusion itself of the argument. Finally, so that's kind of like the first real part, and then the second part is to do this. Choose one of these 2 options. If you believe the argument fails, that is, if you think that the argument for skepticism is a bad argument for skepticism, then I want to know why. I want you to choose one of the premises that you think is false. You could choose more than one of the premises, but just choosing one is the best bet here. You want to just give a really solid case for why you think this one premise of the argument is false. Explain why you believe that premise is false. That is, offer reasons or an argument for believing that the premise itself is false. Give me counterexamples to the premise, right? Tell me how the counterexamples show that the premise is false. Then explain how denying that premise allows you to avoid the conclusion of the argument, right? So give me reasons or an argument for thinking a premise is false, and then show me how by denying the premise, we avoid the argument's conclusion. That's the first option. The second option is this. If you believe that the argument is successful, that is, if you buy the argument, you think, yep, skepticism all the way because this argument is true, then what I want you to do is choose what you think of as the weakest premise of the argument. Choose the weakest premise, the part of the argument that you're like, I wish that was a little bit better. I wish that seemed a little bit more true to me. And then entertain a reason for thinking that the premise might be false. That is, like, imagine someone that's actually like totally against that argument and thinks, oh, this is the bad premise. They think that bad premise is bad, and then they give some kind of reason for thinking it's bad. Now, so what you're trying to do here is, if you think the argument is true, then what I want you to do is find a premise that you think is weak and give a supposed reason for thinking that the premise fails, that premise is false, and so the argument fails. And then I want you to defend that premise in the face of the opposition. I think this second part it's a little bit harder to do, right? You got to defend the premise after you've explained why somebody might think that it's false. And then I want you to explain why the premise is true and the opponent's argument against the premise fails. All right, hopefully that's clear. I think A is a slightly easier one, but if you really think that skepticism is correct and you really want to try hard, feel free to choose B here and try to argue that, argue for each of the premises the skeptical premises, even against, novel arguments. All right. Here are the 4 skeptical arguments that you can choose from. The possibility of error argument, which says that, okay, I'll just go through it. For almost any belief any person has about the external world, that belief could be mistaken. That seems plausible. If a belief could be mistaken, then it is not a case of knowledge. Therefore, almost any belief any person has about the external world is not knowledge, i.e., no one knows anything or more than very little about the external world. Next argument, the introspective indistinguishability argument. This is an interesting one. If a person can have knowledge on the basis of fallible evidence, then there can be cases of knowledge that are introspectively indistinguishable from cases that are of non-knowledge, right? Like, illusions or hallucinations. But there cannot be cases of knowledge that are introspectively indistinguishable from cases of non-knowledge. Interesting premise. Premise 3, a person cannot have knowledge on the basis of fallible evidence, that is, evidence that isn't certain, but all the evidence we have for any propositions about the external world is fallible. It's not certain. So, conclusion, we cannot have any knowledge about the external world. Argument number 3, the certainty argument. If S knows that P, then S is absolutely certain that P. However, premise 2, no one is ever absolutely certain about anything about the external world. So no one knows anything about the external world. Perfect. The 4th argument, the transmissibility argument. This is the one that I sort of started off with. It's like the brain in a vat style argument. We've got two sort of statements. O is take any ordinary external world proposition, like I have hands or something like that. SK, any skeptical hypothesis that's inconsistent with O, like that there's a evil demon that's fooling me right now, or that I'm a brain in a vat. A handless brain in a vat. Premise 1, S, whoever the subject is, cannot know that SK is false. They cannot know that, there's not an evil demon that's fooling them right now. Premise 2, O, ordinary world proposition, implies that SK is false, and S knows this, right? The fact that I have hands implies that that it's not the case that there's an evil demon that's fooling me about my hands, and I know that. Premise 3, if S knows that O is true, and that O implies that SK is false, then S can know that SK is false. Premise 4, so S does not know O, right? Given that we know premise 1 that S can't know that SK is false, but given that if they know that O is true and that O implies that SK is false, then it turns out, no, they must not know O in the first place. And basically what we end up with there is another form of external world skepticism. All right, finally, a note about feedback. Grading papers takes a lot of time, and I'm going to try and streamline the process the second time because the first time it's still taking me too long to finish grading. So what I want to know is whether or not you actually want feedback on your papers. So I know some students really like feedback on their papers because it helps them improve, and other students don't care at all, right? They just want their grade and they want to move on. So if you are one of those people that really cares about feedback, I want you to tell me on your paper that you want feedback, and then I'll give you feedback. But if you don't care at all, and you're not going to look at your paper as soon after I grade it, like you're just going to be like, oh, I got that grade, cool, move on. Then don't ask me for feedback, please, because it'll, it's a waste of my time in the end if you're not going to read them, read it. So, but yeah, also if you want help with your writing, improving your writing, definitely check out the Writing Center. There's a link on the page. And or come by my office hours. My office hours are totally going to be open for helping people learn to be better writers before or after you turn your paper in, right? I mean, we can talk about it after the fact, and you can get feedback there as well. All right, I think that's it.